This is Mo,
And this is Arye,
and you're listening to
the Relatable Podcast. Let's do it.
Damn Feisty.
In this episode, we embark on an enlightening journey into the world of internal family systems therapy with a seasoned professional therapist. We delve deep into the intricacies of our minds, exploring the vital role IFS plays in understanding our inner selves. Join us as we uncover the layers of psyche, discussing how IFS can illuminate the path to healing, self-acceptance, and emotional resilience. From real-life client experience to expert insights, we tackle the burning questions about why therapy is essential for personal growth and well-being. This podcast offers a wealth of knowledge, inspiration, and practical tips to help you connect with your inner family. Tune in to discover how embracing our internal dialogue can lead to a more fulfilled and authentic life. Subscribe now and start your journey towards self-discovery and healing.
Simcha Rabba, for everybody that just clicked on this conversation and they're wondering why they should stay and listen, what do you have to say to them?
I would say that in my limited experience in my life, I've seen in myself and I've seen in others that the model of IFS and the perspective that it gives a person on their life and the people that surround them is, I guess that it's a game changer, a life changer. So I think that the more that we can promote it, the more that we can talk about it, the more that we could influence people to not even go to therapy, just read books about it, study it, listen to podcasts about it.
Sick.
Yeah.
And, for people that don't know what IFS is, we just read
great.
a bunch of words. What is IFS therapy?
Great. So first of all, you're going to have to pause me because I could just talk. I'll just talk for the next 45 minutes.
All yours.
But, so let's see. So in a nutshell, IFS therapy is I think there's we'll say a few things. Number one, it's a belief that we're made up of subpersonalities, and that's not a chiddush of IFS. That's been around for a long time in the psychological textbooks and modalities. The thing that really is brought to the table from IFS is the communication and the language that it gives a person for his emotional world. So one of the things that Richard Schwartz himself says is that the movie Inside Out did a big taiva for the world.
Big service.
A big service, yeah, because it validated and it gave people a feeling that, hey, if I'm hearing different voices in my head, I'm not schizophrenic, I'm not bipolar. This is actually just the way that my psyche is built.
By different voices, you mean what exactly?
Different parts, right. So anybody who's seen the movie Inside Out, it's basically about a young girl that has all these different parts inside of her head, and angry looks a certain way and has a certain personality, and joy acts a certain way and has a certain personality, and sadness, and it's
Anxiety,
just watching.
fear.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So watching that movie can really help a person realize, wait a second, I'm not angry, I'm not sad, I'm much more than that, but I have a sad part and I have an angry part, and all those parts need attention.
You're not identifying with your emotion. It's just a part of you.
Right, exactly.
Well, before IFS therapeutic modality came out, it was more of, if I feel angry, I start identifying with that anger.
Right, yeah.
Oh, so that's a great point, because even before IFS, there was already a concept of differentiation, which is don't use an I language. Use I don't know what it was. Don't say I am angry. Say I feel angry. Let's say
putting
exactly,
separation.
making a space. The thing, and this is one of the big pieces of IFS, is that the language is so validating and it's so beneficial to say a part of me, because on one hand I'm recognizing that this is still me and I still need to deal with this, but it's a part. There's a third party over here.
Right.
So that's
why is that so beneficial?
So first of all, because if I'm angry, then there's really nothing really to talk about. Because
but that's who you are. You can't change.
We can't really move.
If you're 5'10", you're 5'10".
Right, exactly.
Once you're a person that identifies as an angry person, you can never change?
No, not that you can never change, but in that communication. Right now, I'm angry. which means that I've now cut off, in a way you could say, I've cut off access to any other parts of me, and therefore the anger
Right.
is gonna.
That's the communication.
Right, exactly.
Like
Yeah.
separation. Wow.
Yeah, I'll add in that the thing that the movie did miss was another step in IFS, which is not only are there parts of us, but there's also a deeper place inside of us that they like to call the self. In different traditions, they'll call it different things. For Jews, they'll try to call it the soul, unless you're like a really,
Intense view, if you will.
whatever. You could have people that believe, no, that's the behemoth soul, but then there's a deeper soul.
What's the self?
So the self is the core essence of a person. So examples of the self are going to be when a person is experiencing calmness, experiencing curiosity, experiencing compassion, experiencing love. There's, they put it, there's 8 C words, but it's when a person is in touch with their essence.
Wow.
Then they're able now to be a holding space for their parts. So it's 2 major chidushim. It's the language that IFS helps a person begin this like beautiful journey of like, oh my gosh, I can get to know myself from this differentiation, this, third party. But then even more than that is that I don't need you to tell me how to heal, because I have an essence that if I can access, then that's going to bring me to my healing. And that's one of.
Could you change that? Like, does the self ever get?
Oh, the self, yeah, the self is that's another like beautiful,
So it
like
kind of sounds like your neshama. in a
Yeah,
sense.
I was gonna say it's
soul,
like another
yeah.
beautiful like overlap in I remember Rabbi Fisher showing this to me like 3 or 4 years ago. Like if you look in the English translation in Derech Hashem, it talks about like parts. It literally
Really?
uses the word parts.
Interesting.
For like emotions, and then it says an Hashem like doesn't have parts.
Wow.
Whoa.
And then later on in the Sefer, it also says that like a neshama can't be damaged. It can't be like
It's unblemished, always.
right, exactly,
Shining light.
So it's
right.
like it like again like I'm not a fan of like, oh, IFS is Torah, this and that. But like,
Intermixing.
there's
Right,
a lot of it's
Overlaps.
a beautiful overlap of like like there's a belief that is unique to certain modalities, that a person has within him everything that he needs, and he doesn't need the therapist to tell him what to do, that he needs help just accessing his own inner wisdom. And yeah, it's really beautiful. It's like when you think of like the story like Avram Avinu, it's like, yeah, I don't think that anybody today can get to that level of like emotional and
Where do we see that he was emotionally in touch?
that I was just referring to the idea that it says that he kept all the Torah like before before it was given,
Right.
because he like the way that I always understood it was that he was so in touch with himself that the whatever you want to call it, the light of God wasn't being blocked, and he was able to just know
Be a
exactly
clear
right,
conduit
exactly.
for
I'm
that light.
curious.
Yeah.
Someone that might be listening to this conversation, or even myself, like if someone's looking for a like a new therapy path or somewhere to go, why IFS? Like opposed to anything else?
Yeah, so I think that one of the big milas of IFS and
Benefits.
Yeah, the big benefits. Sorry, with the Hebrew, and again, like I said, it could be that other modalities offer this also, but for sure not in the modalities that I've experienced. It doesn't offer a lifestyle.
What does that mean?
I'll give you like an example. EMDR, from my limited knowledge of it and the little trainings that I've done, is about memory, reprocessing memories. It's actually, I memorize it. Eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing.
How you doing?
So that means that like a very common experience that when you're going to be doing EMDR therapy is you're going into traumatizing memories,
right.
and then you're doing eye movement, or bilateral stimulation, switching from your right side of your brain to your left side of the brain to help you process these memories.
Right.
So now there's no question that a person who's doing that type of therapy could be in a situation where they're feeling dysregulated, and they can start, doing their eye movements or doing their bilateral tapping, and that can help them. But that's not a lifestyle. It's not something that is going to be like a new way of them interfacing with the world. When a person does IFS, it gives them a totally new like pair of glasses. They're interfacing with their life differently. It's not just
Session and then you're
Yeah.
reliant on the next week till you do the eye movements and the different
Right, exactly.
exercises.
And again, I don't want to
stop.
it's not just the reliant, it's I'm learning a totally new,
Perspective on life,
Yeah.
like how to view.
Yeah.
I'm with my roommate and he slams the door
Right,
open, and all of a
right.
sudden I get frustrated. That's a part of me to
right,
be able to give space to that.
Right, exactly.
Nice, I like that.
Exactly.
I like that a lot. I didn't hop before. I just realized like I started therapy recently, and it's not IFS.
Yo,
Shout out to Mo.
Kavod,
Nice.
Rebbe's call. Pat myself on the back.
Getting vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started recently, and it's not a lifestyle at all. Like I'm waiting from one session to the next. Like there's nothing in
Right.
between.
Right.
It's kind of something that like it bothered me. Like I guess
Right.
vocalize it because I didn't hop. Like there is a big difference with that for sure.
Right. And I would even say that that's something that I think that you could do IFS therapy, and it is possible that that won't happen. But to me, that would be like a surprise. You know, it would be surprising if somebody is in doing IFS therapy, you know, for a significant amount of time, and they're not walking around with this like new, you know, I've even heard this before. Somebody told me, you know what I don't like about IFS therapy? And anybody who's in the world of IFS therapy is going to appreciate this.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, because they sound weird.
Interesting.
What do you mean?
And
It sounds trippy.
well,
different parts.
Yeah,
and
they'll say something
harmoniously.
they'll
But like
say
when you
like-
think of it, just makes sense on like a basic level.
for sure. So I, in my opinion, people have parts
Ooh.
that get a little bit awkward.
It's an awkward
around-
part or it's a defensive part?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'd have
Okay.
to. I would have to sit with them.
Right, right.
Or they'd have to sit. You see that? They'd have to sit with themselves and see what
Get in
is
touch.
it about people talking in parts language that makes them.
What does
feel-
that mean, by the way? We talk, especially in our circles, about being in touch with oneself. Well, what does that mean, though?
in
in
the
touch with what?
in the IFS world? It's paying attention to what's happening on the inside. You know,
The inner world.
Yeah, I think even now, as you say that, like we could even just right now, I definitely, as you say it, it's like, yeah, like, hey, like there's a part of me coming up. It's like, I really hope that I say the right thing.
Nice.
And you probably have like a part like, hey, I hope this podcast.
Right,
you know?
of course.
And
Yeah.
that to me is like a very simple example where it's just, you're becoming much more aware of what's happening inside.
Of the inner world.
There's also a big thing that was influenced early on in IFS was Haikomi. I think it's Haikomi meditation or Haikomi therapy, and there's a whole aspect of the somatic angle.
Somatic's very popular now.
Of check it right, and
What's
within
somatic?
in the body, where like when you ask somebody like, you know, is a part coming up for you? So usually people will associate parts with either something in their imagination or a thought that they're getting. And in IFS, they also emphasize the body. What are you feeling in your body right now?
Like a certain tension, maybe.
Exactly.
I'm
Shakiness.
just curious.
Yeah.
Can we go a little bit
Yeah.
deeper into like what different parts we have?
Sure.
Like we have obviously there's like anger and whatever, but like what's the, I guess, how does IFS describe it?
I mean, it's really like it's in the person. So
Because I know like there's the conductors and like this and that and the like the self, the conductor,
The protectors, the
Right.
firefighters.
So how does that work?
right. I mean, so there's a lot here. I'm saying like, you know, the way that the IFS model is broken down to is exiles, managers. Managers is two categories of protectors and firefighters.
Okay.
So what that means, and I hope I'm getting it right. I haven't been involved in a training, and
This is brushing up everybody's skills.
Yeah, I
over
know.
here.
I'm like, oh man, I really want to get on a training.
What about the textbook?
Yeah, hopefully,
Just a friendly
hopefully,
reminder.
when in the summertime when things are calmer, I try to get involved. Anyways, so exiles are parts of us that are usually holding pain or associations with things that are not allowed to be accessed.
So can we
so-
just give an example so we can work with like
I mean,
one?
a classic exile is feeling rejected.
Okay.
Right?
Is that from
or,
early
or
on
maybe
stage
like or
usually?
loneliness. I mean, loneliness
Nice.
is like
Loneliness is
real
big.
like
Yeah.
core, right?
Yeah.
Nobody likes to feel lonely.
No.
So we have an exile of loneliness, which means that I'm trying my parts, my system is basically being built around whatever traumatizing memories I have with loneliness.
Right.
So loneliness got exiled. The way that loneliness got exiled is whatever stories happened to me when I was little, and loneliness became something that I'm not allowed to feel, right? Again, I'll just make up a story, but like, a kid that was like neglected and always like sent to the corner. So for him, loneliness isn't just, being in the pool room by himself.
Right.
There are neural pathways that have been connected to like loneliness means I'm
The
standing in
feeling
the corner.
that you're nothing. and
Exactly.
you're rejected,
Exactly.
and your
exactly.
primary caregivers could care less about
Exactly.
you.
So now God created our psyche in this beautiful way where, hey, that's a really uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah.
So we'll get a manager, right? We'll get this protector that makes sure that we're always with people,
Oh,
right? So that protects me
from feeling loneliness.
right? And that's really great. The problem is that when that loneliness is really burdened and it's really intense, then I'll try to be around people even when that doesn't actually work with my outside surroundings or with my inside surroundings. So let's say, for example, drug addiction, right? I'll hang out with the wrong people,
The wrong crowd.
the wrong crowd, because my protector is trying so hard.
Don't be
right?
lonely. You cannot
Right.
sit by yourself.
Exactly. Which again, this is. I don't know if we're gonna. I don't know if you guys are going to want to follow this podcast. I just feel like we're like there's so much going on over here.
We can make
Because
part 2, part 3,
when we
part 4.
when we talk about this, it's like there's a whole nother angle to IFS that we didn't get into yet. Is that wait a second? So when you see a drug addict, when you see a kid with like behavior that you would call toxic or
Rebellious.
rebellious, it's like you actually mean he's just trying to save himself from feeling like debilitating loneliness.
It's a self-preservation method.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's a famous line that like when somebody sees somebody using narcotics or drugs, the drugs aren't the problem. The drugs are the solution.
exactly
To
yeah.
his loneliness,
Right,
to his
exactly,
feelings of pain that he's covering
exactly,
up.
Right. So now drugs. It's good that we brought that up because usually, so let's say the protector wants me to be around people, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's say all of a sudden, his friends want him to like, I don't know, steal something from 7-Eleven.
Yeah, like come on, do it. Let's go,
exactly,
Johnny.
Right. So now that is now like an intense like for hopefully for most people. So the manager is not enough. That protector is not enough. So now you need a firefighter to come out, and the firefighter like literally just shuts everything down. Firefighter is a guy. This is crazy. I don't know if you're going to want to put this on the podcast, but Toots told me that when I explained this concept to him, he said that when he was taught to be a firefighter in 5 towns or wherever they do volunteer firefighter stuff, that if you, God forbid, we shouldn't know of such things, but if somebody's in a fire, then you pull them out by any part of their body. That means that even if you grab their hair, you pull them out of the fire by their hair.
Wow.
Why is
And he
so
said that.
crazy?
I mean, have you ever seen somebody get dragged by their hair?
By all
No,
means.
but you're gonna die.
Exactly. So
Right.
that's how firefighters work. So now
Perfect
this
example.
part
Nice, yeah.
is like, oh my God, I need to go rob from that 7-Eleven, or I need to go beat up that kid, or I need to go do like 10 lines of ketamine so that they think I'm cool.
And I'm part of the guys.
Right, because otherwise I'll be lonely.
And your firefighter's the only one that's gonna be.
And the
able to do that.
firefighters, yeah.
So the
now
firefighters do what? What do they accomplish?
the firefighters will say, like, the firefighters shut down everything. We don't care if we're pulling by the hair. We don't care how this is damaging your
And
body.
they'll do the 10 lines of ketamine.
Right, exactly.
Got you.
And now the reason why this is so crazy is because when you start looking at, this is the idea of a perspective, when you start looking at yourself this way, because you're doing IFS therapy, you're like, oh my God. So this part that I hate so much, that literally makes me do like 10 beer bongs every party I go to, is actually like
And
just,
win 9 of them.
and is literally just making me like, wait, I said beer bongs.
Never mind.
Beer pongos,
Beer pong, put that in
everything,
there.
right? It's really trying to protect me, and that's a whole different lens because now when I see other people doing things that I'm like, what the heck is wrong with you? It's like,
Whoa.
wait, I wonder what you're trying to protect right now.
Wow.
So like that's a huge paradigm shift.
I just realized also, I love what you're saying. We have a huge idea in Judaism of judging others favorably.
gosh.
And that's not always so superficial. This guy
Yeah.
is snorting lines and beating
Wow,
people up at the
wow.
gas station. And I'm
He's
like,
still a yid inside.
yeah, no, maybe he's still pure, and what you're offering is a whole different lens. That yeah,
Right,
maybe he's
right,
doing what you see.
Right, exactly.
You're not being
Exactly.
disillusional, but rather
Exactly.
where is it coming from?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
like I
yeah.
do certain things I'm not proud of, but
Yeah.
it's coming from a place to protect
Yeah,
me.
yeah, for sure. And you see it. I think with addictions, you see it the most, where like people really come in hating that part of themselves, and like it's like
It's
such
very
a
shameful, obviously.
Is that
But
is
it's
that
like-
the,
I feel
maybe is that the word?
Though.
Is that the word shame?
there's for sure shame around
Yeah.
it, but there's also just it's a surface level understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then when a person begins to unlock that deeper place, you can see like a shift like in their body and their whole way of like, wow, like I'm actually not as crazy as I thought. Like I now have more of a understanding of what this part is trying to protect me from. So this is what I really want to say, because this is so exciting. I'm giving a class tonight on toxic relationships.
Everybody be there.
Yeah.
It's a shout out.
Yeah.
And I don't like the word toxic relationships. Like, the reason I wanted to give a class on it is because there's something about it that doesn't sit right with me. And Hashem just put this idea into my head to reach out. Einat Bronstein is she leads IFS Israel. And I just had this feeling like she would be able to like guide me. Like, she would have like,
Well, what's
a
bothering
way-
you? What's
Yeah.
sitting on you?
Well,
About that language, about
right.
toxic relationships.
So I don't even know. It just felt like, it felt very, that's what brought it up. It felt very shaming. Like it doesn't feel like that's a way that we're going to get more connected. It sounds like a way that we're going to push people away.
Meaning we're just gonna like label them as
Right.
toxic.
Like,
Don't
oh,
take
this is
them-
toxic. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So I reached out to her, thank God. And she mamish like said like the most like beautiful thing. And it was like, yeah, like IFS, she said she's like saying like, I appreciate your question, because like that doesn't fit with the IFS lens. Toxic relationships don't, like,
It's a direct
we talk about
contradiction.
what are the
That's-
limitations of IFS that we don't want shaming language. And this is the big piece. And I remember learning this from her when I did my training in 2020. I remember her saying this. I don't take notes. I literally don't.
He's that smart. Whatever.
No, it's probably a part. It's probably a education part, because I did terrible in school. But I remember, like, I always would come and prepare to take notes. So I came with my notebook, and I think the only thing that I wrote was this, what she said, and it's crazy because it still sits with me, is that in IFS, we don't focus on the impact, we focus on the intention.
Right.
One more time. We don't focus.
We don't focus on the impact, we focus on the intention. So you have a guy that's really angry at his mother. Literally, somebody was telling me this yesterday, like, my mom, da 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 da, and she's this and that. Like, she keeps on asking me, like, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I do this? And it's like, yeah, that's the impact. That's your mom's strategy. That's her behavior. Now let's pause. What is your mom's intention? Why does she?
What goodwill she's looking
why-
out
Cared
for
for
you.
you. She,
Right.
She's worried about you.
Right.
She wants to
In the
make sure
most
you're
like
good.
simple language, it's probably love.
Right.
So you focusing on the intention in that relationship
It's much more healthy.
is going to be a lot more beneficial in the possibility of future relationship than if you just label it as a toxic relationship, even though it could be toxic, because it could be that your mom is paranoid, and it could be that she, right, has paranoid parts. It could be that your mom is anxious. She has anxious parts. And it could be that the way that your mom grew up was totally neglected, and she's like literally like flipping,
Generational trauma.
right,
yeah.
exactly, like the whatever.
Now
you know.
easing into relationships a little bit. How does
Yeah.
IFS tie into relationships?
So to me, this is another, like, just a beautiful piece of the model, where if you're doing the classic IFS protocol and working with your parts, then you've now just entered a whole world where, like you said, you said about the Dalek of Schos, you're now able to enter relationships from a much more open space of like really understanding when things aren't working out. And the funny thing is, the word IFS stands for internal family systems. The reason why that is because the guy that created it, or he doesn't say created, actually, it's beautiful.
What
It
does
says
he say?
discovered.
Nice.
Because
Because it was always there.
Yeah, these are truisms that
It wasn't
just,
a novel idea, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
So he says that. So he was a family therapist. So he, in his mind, the way that he looked at therapy was through the family systems lens, which means that when you don't just look at the kid who's an addict in the family, you look at everything else that's happening in the family that's affecting that addictive behavior or rebellious behavior, or the mother that's narcissistic personality disorder. You don't just look at her; you look at what's happening in the family. as a whole.
dynamics, the family dynamics.
Yeah. So he said that when he was working with private clients, they would say something like, "There's a part of me," like people say, like, "Yeah, part of me really wants to go,"
Right.
and he just trusted his gut, and then he just began using the family systems model to help people get in touch with their own parts. And therefore, when that means whichever way you want to go, if you want to come from the family, like whichever direction you're coming in, your relationships are going to exponentially shift, because now when things come up in the relationships, instead of limiting it to like, well, that guy just has a personality disorder, it's like, wait a second, like maybe there's something, which is usually true, by the way. Usually the people that annoy us, they're usually just are trying to like get our attention, trying to become closer to us.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I think of like specific examples where like, somebody wanted to, somebody wanted to like spend time with me and it didn't work out. So then they kind of like you know, it wasn't only his fault. I had my own part in it, but like there was a very significant like angle of like guilt tripping, where it was like, oh, like we're not gonna spend time today, like we're not spending time tomorrow either.
Whoa.
And like for me, it was like very easy to see like this isn't him, you know, trying to attack me. This is him trying to love me.
What's the intention? The intention
Right.
is he cares about you and he
The-
wants
the-
to be with
right.
you.
The intention is he cares about the relationship, but now he has a part that's extreme that for him losing this relationship with me is so intense that he's going to try to manipulate me now.
Whoa.
So it's like when I'm noticing that, and I'll just say like, I think that another beautiful thing of IFS is that in my communication with this person, I'm able to say like, hey, like I'm in a place right now where like, I don't know if I can work with that part of you that loves me so much. Because the way that it's loving me is making me feel like uncomfortable. And it's like, that's just such a beautiful communication. Like it's so
Wow.
not, you know, it's so, obviously people could still get hurt when you talk to them, but like, it's such a, it's like it's like the softest way of saying like, hey, like if you don't do your work with your parts, like my parts aren't going to be able to spend time with you.
And even that's not even such a put down because it's not that you're the problem necessarily.
Yeah, right. That's again with the
it's very
differentiation.
much the different parts
Yeah,
aren't still
yeah,
harmoniously working together.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you, I want to zoom in on the core for a second that we mentioned earlier. For example,
Right, the self, they call
yeah,
it.
so I'm reading a book called Attached by Rabbi Yaakov Danishevsky.
Cool.
And it goes through the attachment theory.
Nice.
And the basic
nice.
idea is that the childhood attachments that we
Yeah,
have form
for
how
sure,
we
for
come
sure.
out years later.
Right.
So that doesn't mention anything about the core. If
Yeah.
somebody,
Oh, great.
Right.
So this is a like this is I guess you could call it a machlekes in the
An argument.
in the therapeutic world. The attachment theory fits very well with IFS because it makes sense because you'll be sitting with a person and you'll help them calm down and get to a place of like, oh, so what will happen if I stop getting everybody's faces? Then nobody will notice me. And it's like, oh, like how long have you been worried about not being noticed? Like my whole life. Like,
Right.
oh, do you want to like ask this part if it like has any like specific memories? And it's like, oh my gosh, like yeah, in third grade, like, you know, whatever the traumatic memory is. So that fits really well with attachment theory because it's like you're literally doing reverse engineering
Yeah.
and just discovering, you know, all the neglect. The nakuda is, and this is something that, you know, people will have varying degrees of this, is the idea of how much can I, as an individual, heal myself from that attachment trauma, and how much do I need a healthy attachment figure to step in to give me that corrective experience in order to heal that trauma. And this is very exciting because I can't remember which book it is. It's one of the IFS books where Richard Schwartz literally owns that he was too extreme in his belief that everybody can heal themselves. Because as much as that's true, there is also an angle of healing that comes from healthy attachment figures. Mm-hmm. And he said that his parts that were burdened because of the extreme culture of the therapeutic world of the therapist is going to heal, the therapist is going to heal you.
it's all dependent on other people.
That when he came out with his theory, he had his own burden parts that went the opposite extreme.
Nice.
And now as he's getting healthier, it's really beautiful. I gotta remember what
Was
book
that the
it was
idea
in.
of IFS that you could do it by yourself? If, like,
No, it's true that we have this core, and this core essence can bring us healing. He was just saying that to deny that there's a healing experience that can also happen through a healthy attachment figure, and not to put emphasis on that's what he felt like was too extreme. Meaning, let's be a little bit more holistic. Like, let's bring everybody in. Like, there's going to be there's going to be a healing experience when you're with your Rebbe. There's going to be hopefully a healthy Rebbe. There's going to be a healing experience when you're with your wife. There's going to be a healing experience when you're with your therapist. And those are coming from externally. There's also going to be a healing experience coming from yourself. The question is, how much emphasis do you put on it?
Wow.
When I was taught IFS, I think that maybe I made this up, but I don't think I did, that the idea of a co-pilot, that the therapist is a co-pilot.
Meaning what?
Meaning that he's not there to drive the plane. You're there to drive the plane, and the co-pilot is basically like, taking in the information, giving the information to the pilot, and now you're
steering it.
Right, exactly.
Living your day-to-day life.
Which is actually something that when I meet people for the first time, part of my protocol, and this is what I learned from my mentor, thank God, who's guided me in unbelievable ways, for sure God sent, that I'm not going to be giving you advice. So if you're looking for a therapist that's going to be giving you advice, then like that's an important conversation for us to have, because it's going to be very frustrating.
He's not going to give you advice, rather what? Direction?
I'm gonna believe in you that you have all the advice that you need. And this is something, again, from, I don't know, 60 years ago, Carl Rogers, that he says that if you cultivate the right environment for a person to be comfortable with himself, then he'll get to where they want to go.
Does that touch on in the book that I referenced before? In chapter 4, it's all about body wisdom.
Nice.
And that's getting in touch with, like we were saying, in the Western world, intellect stands very much at the hierarchy, that if you can't logically explain it, don't try to give me your... Right, exactly. And the idea is that we know deep down, our body senses it. We do something, we're like, dude, I knew I shouldn't have done it. Because I had that tense feeling, but I ignored it and overrid it with my intellectualization,
Yeah, it's definitely an angle of it. And it's so extreme that I was actually sitting with somebody once, and they were saying that they hate it because they get messed up when they trust themselves too much.
Whoa.
What does that mean?
Well, that's what I was like, so like, what's an example? And then he started giving examples where he actually wasn't trusting himself, where like he was getting into issues because he was ignoring his intuition and his gut feelings.
Whoa.
So it was just like fascinating to me. Like, we're so burdened by the idea of like trusting our gut that in his mind, he actually thought he wasn't trusting his gut.
Whoa, yeah.
I don't know if that like just went over, but...
No, I get what you're saying. I think it's like the first... Oftentimes we overcomplicate it. I think Rabbi Fisher says this a lot. Sometimes we just like know the answer, and then we get in all these rabbit holes. What about this? What about that option? Sometimes we just know intuitively what's
also,
right.
I think, and I've spoken to people about this. I don't know if everybody agrees with me, but I think that there's a certain angle of a certain like belief, like not to trust yourself. Like I think that people like get it wrong a lot when they choose like rebellion.
I was about to touch on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a big emphasis on Judaism of appointing a rabbi.
Right.
Do you think that could get too extreme? Like, just
I mean,
nullify yourself and just completely lean on him.
Yeah.
We discussed this.
Did we?
Yeah, literally on Monday about how
what was
that idea? I like that.
Oh, so that's great. So I'll just say it. That's from my mentor, David Alec, that when you have a Rebbe
or a rabbi, a mentor, a guide.
Right, and you're choosing to follow his advice by ignoring what you feel is right, like nullifying yourself to him, then you still need to take responsibility for making that choice, because you're the one that's choosing him as a Rebbe.
For sure.
So I even remember Rabbi Kalish saying once that if you have a Rebbe that's always telling you what to do, then like run away as fast as you can.
Right.
Whoa, meaning what?
So,
what do you think a prototype mentor would, instead of telling, it's guiding, like kind of being that co-pilot that you were describing?
I think that it's that, but there is also room for nullifying yourself. I just think that like it has to be more balanced. It's not. I'm not always nullifying myself. Like nullifying myself is, and again, I don't know if this fits with all Jewish hashkafa or all therapeutic hashkafa, but for me, what feels right is that like the nullifying myself should be the exception, not the rule. If I'm constantly nullifying myself to other people's opinions, then that would make me really question, like, so where am I?
Who am I?
Right. And that's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, im ein ani li, mi li. So
translated in English as
if I'm not for me, then who am I? If I'm not doing if I'm not doing me, then who's going to be me? And I even think, if I remember correctly, there's another Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says that the only free person is somebody that busies themselves with Torah. And it's like, somebody listening to this would be like, what do you mean? But we're supposed to nullify ourselves to God.
Right.
And I think that that's like exactly like what we're touching on, that my nullifying myself from God isn't coming from a place of like fear or like not knowing what to do. It's more of a choice of, I recognize how much I need God in my life, and therefore I'm going to make a choice to nullify myself to God,
as opposed to just a desperate just take me,
which
fall on top.
by the way, like I think probably for the average person that's growing up religious, it probably wasn't the choice.
Yeah, right. I know my own journey. Yeah, it's much more when speaking to rabbi, it's always like whenever anybody makes a big decision, switching schools, switching yeshivas, a job, like,
It's like
did
the
you ask a
rabbis-
rabbi? Did you ask a rabbi?
Right,
Whoa,
right,
whoa.
right,
Maybe
right.
I did the research. I looked into it. I spoke
Right,
to friends. I got objective
But
opinions.
again, but then you could have somebody that's
For
going
sure.
to the other extreme.
Right, I'm doing exactly.
So, and that's where parts come in, because if it's a burden part, right? If you grew up your whole life with a message from your parents, you can't trust yourself.
Right.
Everything we do has to get passed through the rabbi.
Right.
Then that can create a belief that I can't trust
But at the
myself.
same time, the rabbi, let's say in the family setting, the rabbi is the good is like the good mediator that you need, because
Yeah.
your family could have their own issues
Yeah.
and you, and then
Yeah.
you have the guy in the middle.
Yeah.
I guess it's just like it has to be a conversation, not just like a ruling.
Yeah, and again, like if somebody, I know, like for example, like different communities in the Hasidic community, Rebbes are much more, Rebbes are, I
It's
think,
everything.
I would say even my idea of like nullifying yourself to God, I think that there's a concept of nullifying yourself to the Rebbe. So
sure.
like I would say like, yeah, like I want to make room for like all, different perspectives just from my experience and from what I think is beneficial for me and the people that I surround myself with is like, let's become a little bit more autonomous and then at least have the decision to nullify. And now's a really good time for me to say this, that I really want to emphasize, like, if I say anything that doesn't land well with somebody, like let's say somebody's listening to this and they're like, whatever I'm saying, they're just like, oh, that's crazy. So first of all, like I'm just a guy with an opinion, so throw it in the garbage.
We can link the WhatsApp.
or like reach out to me on WhatsApp, because I'd love to like become more, expansive and understand other people's, opinions. So if I'm,
Should we get Rebbe's WhatsApp in the link below?
Yeah,
description?
share the WhatsApp for sure.
Beautiful.
Like I'm saying,
Okay.
I think one of the
Very,
beautiful
very
things,
exciting, yeah.
by the way, I think like just again with this, idea of like how like the parts perspective is that when people call me, I have a part that like puts me on the spot. And I think that a lot of people can like identify with that. And I think that for me, one of like the beautiful things of WhatsApp is that like, yeah, like you can send me a message, I can think about it, I could take a few days to respond,
Right.
and like I don't need to respond from a part. I could actually like give myself the space. Right.
Wow.
It's
You
like-
mentioned before on Monday, I think it was, that somebody reached out about your class and you were very nervous to open it
Oh,
because for fear
yeah.
of criticism.
Exactly,
And
right.
that resonated because I have that also.
Right.
Like my friend who hasn't spoken to me in a year reaches out. I'm like, oh, like what's
Right,
this about? You
right.
know?
And I just want to like add on to that. That's why it's so beautiful to have the language of IFS and the understanding and the work, because if you can think about that example that you're giving now that I gave, which is I get a WhatsApp and I think, oh my God, like what did I say wrong in the share, right? Even somebody right now, somebody WhatsApps me about this podcast, I might have a part of me that comes up like, oh my gosh, what did I say wrong? Right? Now let's say let's say there is something that I said that wasn't exactly. If I'm having the conversation from that part, then that conversation is not going to go in a good place, because I'm in a fear state. I'm afraid right now. So you're not really talking to me as a whole. You're talking to my scared part. So whatever answer I give you is going to be skewed through the lens of my scared part. When I got that WhatsApp and I got scared, I gave space to that part, and I was able to like really walk it through. Like it's okay.
Wow.
So now when I listen to the message, I'm listening to it from a much more open place, which means that my response is from a much more open place. So all of our conversations are just becoming more authentic.
It's beautiful, beautiful. I just think we should wrap up over here. Do you have any to sum it up, any last parting words?
Rebbe, if there's one thing that you want somebody listening to this conversation to, take away, to think about, I know that's a little bit on the spot.
Yeah.
If there's anything you
Definitely
could
on the
particularly
spot.
think about.
I would definitely encourage people to, I would say like this, I would say that for me, my experience was that when I used to hear people say like, sit with yourself, go take a walk, it was like a very, I wouldn't say invalidating, it was a very frustrating experience, because like I just didn't know what to do. So if anybody like connects to that of like just not knowing like what do you do when you're with yourself, then like do yourself a favor and buy self-therapy. Read the book Self-Therapy, because that literally is a book teaching you how to do IFS on yourself.
Nice.
Wow.
Rebbe, thank you so much for joining us.
Beautiful.
It's been an
Unreal.
absolute pleasure, and I hope
Thank
to
you.
have a part 2 sometime soon.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much.
Ryan.
Beauty.